dear to me, all right? And I'm pretty sure that it's near and dear to you guys, whether you have children or not, if you have nieces, nephews, baby cousins, surrogate daughters, sons. You know, this is an issue that is of the utmost importance to our Black African nation. So we're going to get started in just a few minutes, but want to make sure everybody's in position. All right, guys, peace and blessings, y'all. My name is Sam P.K. Collins. I'm also known as Raz Plokuya Glebo by a select few people, or you can call me whatever you, whichever one makes you feel comfortable, but just know that those are both my names pretty much. I'm a grassroots journalist and an educator, born and raised in Washington, D.C., also known as Banneker City. All Eyes on DC, my platform of the last 3 years, has been an effort pretty much to inform the public and to pretty much lay the groundwork for our struggle and to galvanize people through information. We do that by pretty much providing a platform for people in our community who are doing wonderful things in the interest of our liberation, and we look at their work in the context of the issue area that they're working in. Sometimes you might see me on stage by myself, and that's because I often give presentations about facets of our experience as a Black African nation. We did that earlier in the summertime when we talked about the power of politicking as a unit, and today, on October 19th, 2 days before my 29th birthday, we're going to speak about pretty much revolutionary education. Can I get an ashe? Ashe. All right, ashe. Yeah, there we go. The young ones in the front.
That's what we say at my school.
Yeah, you know.
When we say our grace.
Exactly. There you go. So here's the deal right here, and I'm pretty glad that the young sister up front talked to us about her education. You can already tell that she is in an institution where revolutionary education happens. So here's how today's program is going to run down pretty much, and I want to thank you guys for being here tonight. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're here with us tonight in the interest of our Black African nation. Now, today's going to be pretty interactive. I'm going to lay the groundwork. First, I'm going to define revolutionary education as it relates to our situation as Black African people, and then I will walk you through a process to create curriculum and lesson plans by using the lesson plans and curriculum that I've developed as a case study. This summer, I had the honor and pleasure of teaching 2 cohorts. One cohort was middle schoolers, another cohort were high schoolers. Yes, ma'am.
That keeps changing into colors.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry. I'm pretty sure they got it figured out back there. It's fine. So one cohort was a high school cohort. Another cohort was a middle school. And pretty much what they did, as I walked them through the writing process, they were able to write about a conflict that they experienced in their young lives and how it changed their character, pretty much. And I did that by teaching elements of storytelling and also teaching the writing process. And we did it in pretty interactive activities through the All Eyes on DC Writers Workshop. So today's presentation will be about developing curriculum and creating lesson plans for young Black African children, but it'll be done in the context of the All Eyes on DC writing program. What I'm kindly asking here, in the interest of making this an interactive experience, is for the audience members pretty much to think about their industry. Think about the industry that you're in and imagine yourself as a member of that industry as well as an educator, because that's what we all are at the end of the day. We're all educators, all right? And we have to find ways to make the material that our children have to learn very applicable to real life, because that's what they're always going to ask. They're going to ask, how does this apply to real life? This is so boring. Why do I have to know this? But I'm of the belief, and to an extent the knowledge, because I've done this through reasoning, that if you apply those raw skills to the actual craft that you're in, and you lay those parallels down, the students will be able to resonate, and they will appreciate it even more. Because this new generation, they've seen how we've done stuff, and they're pretty much not falling for the gavel anymore. They want something more for themselves. They don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars on an education that's going to result in them making just as much as a person who didn't go to school. They don't want to go to school for 8 hours a day and learn the colonizer's history, their English, whatever else. They want something new for themselves. So it's up to us to push the mold and to take stuff to a new level. with that in mind, I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes to think about this question, and if I can get a couple volunteers. The question is, what career paths or skill sets do we need for a black African nation? And I'm saying that because revolutionary education, the primary goal is to nation build. Remember, nation building happens within the family because you need a strong family structure in order to mold the child and incubate them in their first years of life so that they come out pretty much balanced and holistic beings. So that when they do go to school, they're able to listen, they're able to respect their elders, they're able to work with their peers in a respectful manner. So that's where nation building starts. But the nation building is a lifelong process where youth are pretty much learning. They're learning and they're thinking about the skill sets and talents that they have, and they're thinking about what contribution they can make to their society. You have to keep in mind that we're part of an ecosystem. So everybody's equal, but we all play different parts in the interest of our black African nation. So if we can just think about it for 2 minutes, what skill sets are needed in the interest of the black African nation? Think about a black Wall Street. Think about an all-black town. Think about Chocolate City before it got turned into milk chocolate, caramel, whatever you want to call it. What different parts were inside it that made it tick? Let's think about that briefly. He's flicking. It's fine. Any volunteers? I got a couple. All right, perfect. In the back. What you got for me? I thought I saw you raise your hand. Sorry.
I did raise my hand.
My apologies. Thank you.
Hi, family. I'm Bumby, and one of the things that I do know that we need is, and what we already have, as you just see, is independence. And I mean independence in having collective economics or group economics where we can nation build. Because yeah, it starts with the family, but financially, like as a people, we don't know how to really spend, invest, and build up our businesses and our community when we have these businesses. So if we start, pushing their raw talent, they can become entrepreneurs and really know what it is to have things where money, anybody from the hood, I don't even care here too. You gotta do something to help better the situation. So it's not like our people don't know or don't want, but we have to have spiritualists, healers, wealth builders. We need, like you just said, it's an ecosystem. So.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Let's give Bumpy a hand, y'all. Let's give Bumpy a hand. I'm going to follow up with that part. I'm going to follow up. So you speak about entrepreneurs. You spoke about spiritualists and healers. All right, whatever industries can entrepreneurs dominate or get into in the interest? Okay, technology. Anybody else? Go ahead, come out.
We need infrastructure. Like roads, bridges, buildings, irrigation, sanitation systems.
Perfect. I definitely agree. So we're talking about construction workers. We're talking about engineers. So the sciences, STEM. That's what I'm hearing. Let's take 2 more. Anybody else want to jump out there? Baba Charles.
We need to know how to make things for ourselves.
Okay.
Manufacture.
Manufacturers, okay, perfect. I totally agree. To that point, I want you guys to imagine a timeline at the end of the Black Power era, right, where cities across the country got industrialized, and where they gave more of an emphasis on pretty much the 4-year college degree whatsoever. Not saying that getting a college degree is wrong or it's not useful, but like I said before, we're talking about a diversification of skills and a diversification of people. Everybody's not going to be in the office. Everybody's not going to be a scholar. Like we said before, we need more infrastructure. We need more manufacturing. So we need to keep that in mind in building our nation. Last one.
Agriculture. So we need to know how to grow our food.
Good, agriculture. All right, so let's stick with those in our minds. I want you guys, as we go along in the presentation, think about what raw skills are needed to learn, agriculture, to learn manufacturing, to learn engineering. Whether it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, the Pythagorean theorem, whether it's learning how to read or, comprehend or make inferences. Just think about those raw skills that are needed. All right. Let's keep it moving. Okay, so like I said before, today's presentation is called The Keys to a Revolutionary Education. This is courtesy of the All Eyes on DC show and the All Eyes on DC brand. Like I said before, we've recently expanded into grassroots education. So here I am using what I know as a journalist and a writer to teach writing to young people and to help them be expressive. Next slide, please. Revolutionary education has several facets, but I've narrowed it down to a few for the purposes of tonight's presentation. People who are immersed in revolutionary education, they learn and they become affirmed in their Black African identity. I say Black African, some people might say I'm being redundant, but I am of the belief through my experiences and that of others that you have to be Black and African. You have to have a Black consciousness and knowing who you are in relation to others in this world and in knowing the racial caste system that was created generations before us. You have to be African in the sense that you pay homage to your ancestral lineage, no matter where you were dispersed in the world. So we say Black African to get our children in the mindset that they're caught up in the Babylon system and they have to use their skills to help us get out of it. And that's what revolutionary education does. It prepares our children for the future that they must take over, and it gets them in the mind frame to become revolutionaries, not like the revolutionaries in the movie per se, but revolutionaries in the sense that they're playing their part to build our nation. The second part, positive, healthy relationships between adults and young people. This is a very, very big one. All right, there's a schism in our community between the elders and the young people. And an even bigger schism, I would argue, between the junior elders and the older elders. There's been a lot that's happened along the way. It's not necessarily our fault, but we got to get back to that part where pretty much each group is learning from one another and we're exchanging information. So that's another facet of revolutionary Black African education that we're going to talk about today. The last one, development of critical thinking skills. Well, you have two ones here. Development of critical thinking skills. Critical thinking means going beyond the textbook, going beyond A, B, C, D, E, F on the test, and really using your mind to mold patterns and to recognize patterns and to come to your own conclusion about how the world works. We're not teaching you what to know, we're teaching you how to think and we're teaching you how to reason so that you can press the mold further. Because children are teachers. We have to empower them with the skill sets that they need to know in order to push the mold forward. The last one here, deliberate choice of career paths. No longer must we leave our kids, our young people, into the wilderness without knowing what they want to do or having some sort of idea about what career path they want to take. And I'm of the mindset that young people have to be not indoctrinated, but they have to be prepared for that from a very young age. And that means, exposing them to different activities, exposing them to different kinds of people with different career paths, and letting them be creative and use their imagination to pretty much go on to something. And if they want to be everything, let's just give them the skill sets that they need to create their own career. That's what revolutionary education does. Question? Yes, sir.
I think I'll have a little different approach to career path. Right now, because we are so far, I'll just say behind, I think, in the creation of our own culture and society, we need to designate skill sets toward the need of the community.
I agree with you.
Okay, we need to assign, everybody should have 3 or 4 skill sets that they are competent in. And based on the needs of those communities in the diaspora, we need to assign our youth with those skills, or who has those skill sets.
I agree with you, and I would add to say that we should meet them in the middle. We can assign them, but the assignment should be based on the interest that they have and just pretty much pushing them in that direction, but in the sense that we're not pushing them towards something that they're going to disregard because they're not interested in it just yet. So pretty much when they're young, exposing them to everything, watching how they move, what they move toward, and then making suggestions, and then even prodding them a little bit, like was done to me. My father saw from a very young age that I liked writing and speaking. In the 8th grade, he suggested, don't touch computers like that. You look like you're a journalist. go join the journalism club. And from that point on, I got that education in that craft. You know, I would argue the same is for what that should be done for the young people, in the sense that they're becoming more independent-minded than we were, and that's because the adults and the system that was built for them has failed them. We're 2 generations in from the crack cocaine era. So a lot of these kids are adults in their own way. They got minds of kids, but they're adults, and they've done adult things, and they've seen adult things, you know. And if we can just continue the presentation, I definitely got you, but I just want to say, in the interest of making this nation, we got to be able to have some push and pull and create that ecosystem where the adults and the children can confer with one another, so that it feels like it's not a forced issue. I definitely got to go.
I just want to add one more piece.
Sure.
I'm looking at the whole is greater than the individual. Okay? Everything we do has to be for the improvement of the whole, not the individual.
Definitely.
Okay, so if they would humble themselves, if you will, the young people humble themselves until we get into a, I guess, independent mode, until we get such a foundation that we have a strength in. They need to humble a little bit just to get where we need to be. That's all I'm saying.
I understand. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, I would just like to say, as within, so without. So yes, of course, the individual is important. The whole is important, but so is the individual. Because if all those individuals do not even have a sense of what it means to be whole themselves, how can they respect something that we're trying to bring together? So it's kind of frustrating to see people are the elders, and this is where the disconnect say like, oh, like we're being disrespectful, we don't have no regard, we need to humble ourselves, we need to do things of that nature. Because I know disrespect to my mother, but I am a product of a crack, like my mother had me on crack. It's just that simple. So to like come from Ohio to even be here at this very moment and even hear you speak is very powerful, and we need you. So because we're here, we're building, and we don't need no beef, no imaginary, because we're humbling ourselves, but we need our elders to humble themselves to know, like, we need guidance, we need love, and we need healing, because a lot of us was angry out here, and I was one of those angry girls. I was always fighting, always mad, but because I did not have knowledge of self, I resulted my energy into those different negative things and things of that nature. So, like, as you said, we allow us to grow and expand. I'm gonna let you continue.
I appreciate that. If you don't mind, let's continue that part of the discussion. There's room for it later on in it. I want us to get to the bottom of this, because I see where both sides are coming from. Bob and Beasley, if you don't watch Breakfast Club, I'm not going to assume, but the Breakfast Club, that's Charlemagne and all them. They actually had a brother from the Nation of Islam on there who made a point, just like you said. He spoke out against people who take on what's that discipline called? Not the literary arts, but the liberal arts. Thank you. He criticized them for taking on the liberal arts. You know, the stuff where you can't touch materials and stuff like that. He really wanted to push them towards like engineering and other skill sets that would make us money. You know what I'm saying? But would also be in the interest of the nation. Just like you said. Just want to make that point. So, you know, there's nuance here. We're going to get to the bottom of that. Let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, today's objective. So I'm a teacher by trade. Well, yeah, I'm a teacher by experience. I did not go to any formal education institute. I just learned in the trenches, pretty much. So today's objective, because we always got to have an objective, and you'll learn this when you come to curriculum and curriculum design and lesson planning. All right. Our objective is to outline a process. You guys will see a process unfold today, where you will see African-centered curriculum and lesson plans that show the application of concepts in the discipline through the execution of a task done in that industry. So what does that mean? Break that down for us, Bible Porphyria. All right, that's what the kids in Nation House call me. So every person, regardless of whatever job or industry they're in, learn to do how they learn, have certain skills, or they have certain tasks that are carried out throughout their daily chores or whatever, right? But each task requires background knowledge, okay? So if you're a builder, right, if you're a bricklayer, you have to know math, okay? If this square footage how many bricks will this square footage allow me? So I'm gonna calculate the square footage of every brick, then divide the square footage of the whole thing over how much each brick is to get how many other bricks I need. You see, that is application of raw concepts that the kids just aren't getting. In school today, they're getting X equals Y, this, that, and the third, and they're getting graphs and all that, but they never get to see the application. Today's task is to help you guys think about your craft and think about how you can design a curriculum where they're using those raw skills in the execution of a task that you would have to do on your job, okay? Next slide, please. So that's just what it is, y'all. We gotta make this more applicable to the kids. And we gotta get the kids in the mindsets that they're choosing careers that will fulfill them, but also fulfill the nation. All right, so like I said, the case study is the AllEyesOnDC workshop. I'm gonna pass around 2 copies. Well, I'm gonna pass around a copy each of the workshop anthologies, and also an anthology that was completed during my first year at Paul Public Charter School. Shout out to Brother Jerome right here in the front, former student of mine. You know, he's in the trenches as well, so he's working tonight. We gotta give him a hand, y'all, for real. Young people. So as you guys will see in the documents that are being passed around, I'm currently asking that you guys bring it back. In these documents, young people, they spend time with me learning how to write and learning how to defend themselves through the written word and learning how to express themselves. So we went through the entire writing process, and as we did that, I showed them the raw skills. And I want you guys to do the same as well, because we're all educators. Next slide, please. All right, the outline of the presentation. First, we're going to identify key terms. Second, we're going to develop classroom culture. Third, we're going to integrate academics into the key concepts of your craft. Fourth, we're going to do I do, we do, you do. And then we're going to go to the final product, all right? Let's keep it moving, y'all. All right, so we got 3 terms right here, all right? Our first term is education, the second term is curriculum, and the third term is lesson plan. As you guys will see, we're going from macro to micro. Macro meaning holistic, micro meaning the very, very smallest detail, okay? So macro is education. Education is an entire system. It's an entire pedagogy. It's an entire paradigm. Paradigm meaning a reality. We shape reality through education. And oftentimes, the status quo has limited our children's conception of what is possible. So African-centered revolutionary education helps our children imagine their lives as revolutionaries, where they're able to take on the world and they're able to use the skill sets that they love and that they've been embedded with to become better people. And through that, they learn the skill sets, but they also learn about the culture behind the skill sets. They learn about what was taken from our ancestors, and they also learn about our ancestors. They learn, terms, they learn culture, and just other facets of that. So that's the education piece. We're going to get even more specific. After we created that cultural educational background, we got to create a curriculum. A curriculum pretty much is a pathway to learning. So if you're a plumber, if you do HVAC, if you work on roofs, if you're a journalist, if you're a scholar, if you're a professor, if you're an accountant, whatever you are, you have to develop a curriculum where the end goal is the person that's taking this class becomes just like you. So you got to think about what are all the key components of your career, and then you divide each component into each little section. And then you walk them along that path in the curriculum until they get to the end goal of being whoever it is that they are. You understand that? Can I get an ashe? All right, that's exactly how we do it. That's the curriculum piece. And oftentimes, depending on the length of time, in a lot of school systems, you have a whole school year, which is about 9 months. Some home schools, they do 12 weeks or 11 weeks. You got to be able to think about how much do you want to pack into that allotted amount of time, and how many sections you want to divide it into. So if you're part of a homeschool collective, you could probably do 2 12-week sessions. Each section is divided into 2 parts of the curriculum pretty much, where they're learning this skill set, They're learning this skill set, learning that skill set, so forth and so on. So it's up to you to figure out how you want to divide the time, but I would suggest that you make it in small bites so that it's digestible. Okay, that's the curriculum part. Remember, with the curriculum, we're taking our children along a path where the end goal is pretty much becoming that person or profession that they want to be, or that's designed for them by the curriculum. The smallest part right here is the lesson plan. Now, the lesson plan takes us even deeper into the curriculum, or curricula, if you want to get really technical in English, like plural, okay? Now, each curriculum, you have several lesson plans. Keep in mind, right? If you have a 12-week course, for example, and you meet twice a week, that's 24 lessons. Each lesson has its own lesson plan. So let's say 24 lessons, let's say 4 units. So each unit is how many lessons? 6 lessons, okay? The first unit, in my case, might focus on parts of speech or grammar. Second unit, writing paragraphs. Third unit, writing a persuasive essay. Fourth unit, analyzing pretty much. And the end goal being pretty much being prepared for an English college class, all right? So what I did right there, I just showed you guys a whole curriculum that I designed off the top of my head. I divided it, depending on the number of classes, into several parts. So if you take the first quarter, which is about 6 classes, each one has a lesson plan in itself. So for the first class, we're going to learn about parts of speech. How am I going to take you guys along that path? I have to think about myself as a culturally affirming educator to get you guys on that path where first you don't know about parts of speech, but now you do. And you're also going to learn about that through various activities where you're not just sitting down, but you're playing, you're talking, you're competing, you're moving around pretty much. So here we are with the various facets of the educational experience, the most specific being the lesson plan. This is where the teacher has the most control, and as you guys will see later on in the presentation, the lesson plan is the raw material, is the theory, but the practice is in the classroom. And depending on what happens in the classroom, your whole lesson plan for the next class can be changed, as well as the curriculum, because you never know if a child might grasp it or not. But we'll talk more about that. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the pathway to an active classroom. All right, so like I said before, we're walking on a path, we're trotting through Babylon, through all the bad stuff. We're going to get to a mind space where we have a classroom that's culturally affirming and where kids are learning and thriving. Next slide, please. All right, the classroom is ground zero, okay? Now, depending on your craft, once again, you guys are thinking as professionals and as people who are educators. You have to make your classroom just like the environment you would find yourself in your profession. So if you're a mechanic, your classroom has to look like a mechanic shop. Be real creative with it, right? Set up a desk space that looks like the space where, the car would be. You might want to get pictures of like African mechanics or Africans who designed, cars or designed vehicles, stuff like that, depending on the industry. Remember, you want to reinforce the importance of the craft, but you also want to expose your youth to Black Africans who have done it way before you did it. That way you mix the history, the culture, and the actual tangible craft. And that's how we create an environment. So that's the classroom part. The second part is the language. All right, so like I said before, you guys might have heard the I go, I may. That's a call and command response that I've used a lot of times in my experiences. As of recently, I've gone to institutions where they speak Swahili off the break. So here I am just learning. All right, and that, because language is pretty much a cultural identifier, right? That has given me even more confidence to teach what I teach in that space, because I know by them taking on Key Swahili, they're taking the first step pretty much in bringing us back to our African identity. So that's part of creating that culture, right? Even calling elders mamas and babas, that's another part, right? We're pretty much taking ourselves out of a Eurocentric system and we're creating a system that was lost from us, that was taken from us. Because as you guys probably already know, on the African continent with these missionaries and these schools that they're opening up, even African children on the continent aren't learning how they used to. You understand? Everybody wants to be immersed in a Eurocentric system because they see that as the pathway to commerce. And I'm not saying, That's definitely wrong. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. It's definitely wrong. You know, and I'm not afraid to say that. We need to get back to a way of learning that fits our people. And part of that means exposing them to people who've done it before, and also creating an environment where they're immersed in their craft and they're learning as they're going. Like I said right here, it's theme related and it's connected to the subject matter and the career path. Next slide, please. Any questions so far? Any questions or comments along the way? Time check, because I want to leave time for questions.
8:47.
All right, perfect. We're good on time. I'm going to speed right along. I want to make sure that we're talking. All right? So, once again, the classroom is ground zero. I need a volunteer to answer this question for me. What do you notice about this desk design? Somebody raise your hand and tell me. What do you notice about? Go ahead, Bobby Charles.
It's circular, it's round,
All right, it's round. Perfect. Why is that important?
because everybody can see each other.
Everybody can see one another. Perfect. Where would the teacher stand usually?
In the middle.
Usually in the middle.
Okay, the teacher can stand in the middle. Where else could the teacher stand, man? What do you think?
You can stand outside.
Yeah, you can stand outside,
You
but I
can-
think what I like about the design is that the instructor isn't in a position that would lead the students to believe that the instructor is like elevated above them, which
I
is
stated that.
what the traditional classroom is like. You have the instructor in front and then the students sort of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anybody? Go ahead, Rob. Thank you. Thank you.
I think they could stand at any of the corners, because then they can still see everybody. They can see them.
Exactly. This is my personal style of teaching right here. All right. At a certain point, before the end of my tenure at my last employment place, pretty much, I had this class set up in a circular position. I made it so that I was never sitting down. I was never in front of the students. I was always active, because the students, they mimic your attitude and they follow your temperature. So you always got to be active. You got to be as passionate about the material as you want them to be. And with them being in a circle, they see one another, they get to confer with one another, and we're working in the spirit of I and I, right? The concept that we are reflections of one another. So if I want you to be active, I have to be active as well. Your temperature has to match my temperature, and we all got to be in a circle. There is nobody above one another, pretty much. If you want to, for the people who are into the writing disciplines, if you want to make it more exciting, I would suggest that you get small whiteboards for each student, right? You throw some questions out there. They got to write the answer down. They put it up. They get real competitive, man. These kids are real competitive. If you make it so that they get to compete against one another and they get bragging points, brownie points, whatever, they would enjoy it. And this is also the perfect format for seminars. You understand? So where like you throw questions out there and students get to talk to one another. All right, write down the answer. Now turn to your neighbor, say your answer. Okay, what did your neighbor say? What do you think about that? All right. Another way I would have you guys actually take this a step further, right? Depending on the classroom, you might also want to get the sheets of paper that stick to the walls, right? So you can have different questions all around the walls and have sticky paper, right? All right. Each question would be related to the subject matter. What do you think about so-and-so? Get the paper, stick it on the wall, the kids move around. You know, I forget what they call it. They call it a walking tour or something like that. But it often gets the students moving around a lot, especially those teenagers, man, because their bodies are growing, they sleep later at night, they wake up earlier, and they're just groggy in the morning. And a lot of them might not even have the right food, you understand? So we got to get them in that moving mode. Otherwise, they get cranky, you get cranky trying to wake them up, and then conflict starts. It's all about avoiding conflict at all costs. And part of that comes from a classroom culture where respect is pretty much solidified at the very beginning. And that comes from creating respect. Students do not care about how much you know. They just want to know how much you care. And an elder told me that. An elder told me that. They don't care how much you know, they want to know how much you care. So a lot of these kids, they're going to test your patience at first. They're going to call you names, they ain't going to listen, they're going to play for their friends. But you got to stand firm, but you also got to be kind to them. And you got to be restorative. Because restoration is where it's at. You know, these kids, they make mistakes all the time, but we got to allow room for them to pretty much grow. And that's where the African adult, young person paradigm or relationship comes in. All right, we're going to move on if there aren't any questions. Good to go? I see Brother Avery here.
Yes, sir, brother.
My man, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you as well.
All right, next slide, please. So the instructor, like I said before, is a very pivotal part of the classroom environment. As an instructor, I'm going to tell you this right now, you need to make sure that you're well rested. Whatever you have going on at home, keep it outside. Keep it outside. Because the kids, they don't want to see it, they don't want to hear it. You don't want to take what you got going on outside on them. Because it happens. And you know, oftentimes when you're working in the Babylonian school system, the politics of that system comes down on you. And because the teachers are on the front line, they take their frustration out on the students, and the students bark back at them, but the students don't often know what's going on. I'll give you an example. The testing culture in there, right? So oftentimes, working in the school system, you can have a whole lesson plan lined up. They bring you in the back during the summertime, they tell you, hey, make this lesson plan, make this curriculum, we're gonna follow it. But because they got these park exams, your instruction gets interrupted every 10 days or so. Sometimes every 5 days, the closer you get to the actual test. That means nothing to the students, but means to the funding of the school. So you as a teacher are under pressure. Students got testing anxiety. They're being rebellious. They're putting their heads down. But you got to make sure that they pass them tests. So what are you going to do when you're under pressure? They're having you spend 8, 9 hours in the school building with no sunlight, nothing like that. They're making you be a warden to those kids. Hey, tuck your shirt in, stop walking so fast, do this and that. What are you going to do? That wears down on a person, especially an African-centered person who has no business being in there in the first place. We're talking about creating healthy instructors and making sure that our teachers are on the front lines of the right mind, soul, and body. Y'all, can I get in that shape? So as an instructor, you have to make sure that you know what you're in this for. And you always have to think about your craft. Think back to what made you love your craft. Think back to those moments of euphoria. My moment of euphoria is seeing my article in The Informer after working on that thing all night. Seeing it, I'm like, dang, okay, it's worth it, man. Because let me tell you something, every weekend, I get up 5:30, 6:30, and I'm trying to crank those articles out. And it's stressful because you got to fact check, you got to call people, track them down, you got to edit. The editor might not like what you said, so you got to bark back at him or her sometimes. But when that thing finally comes out and people comment on it, people write letters, that's euphoric to me. And as instructors, we got to think about those moments of euphoria that we want to pass down to the young people. The young people got to see us happy. The young people got to know that there's happiness in our industry. Why would they want to be in your industry if every time you come to class you're mad? I wouldn't want your job if you're mad all the time on it. But at the same time, you got to let them know that sometimes the job is hard. So there's a balance between building that resilience, but also being happy in the moment. And I'm speaking to you as somebody who's learning as he's going. I don't know everything. I'm just trying to pass along the gems as I learn it. But the instructor's happiness and well-being is very essential to the foundation of the classroom. And I have to stress that enough to y'all. So it's 2 things. Knowing your craft, right? And knowing who you are as a person, to know your triggers, and to know what makes you happy, what makes you sad, and to know what to avoid in the interest of making the classroom safe and fun for all. Next slide, please. Audience question. So this one's for y'all. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds. I want you guys to think about your craft real quick. What is it about your job that you love? I poured my heart out. I mean, I'm a people person, you know. Sometimes I don't like people because they ask a lot of me. You know, you understand? Understandably, you want to fall back. But I just like people being happy of stuff that I wrote, and I like knowing that people were affected by the information that I gave them. All right, so that's what I like about my job, that I get to change lives even if it's a little bit, right? So I want you guys to think about briefly what it is that you like about your job or your career. I'm going to take volunteers. That Bobby King?
Sí.
Okay.
Sí, señor.
Bueno. Who got me? I saw a hand up there. That brother Avery?
Yes, sir.
All right, my man.
I'll share with you since you shared, brother. What I like about my job, truthfully, only the paycheck.
I respect that.
That's why I'm always in the community doing work, trying to do something for our youth. and looking to build with other individuals such as yourself that's trying to change the condition of our people. I appreciate the African-centered concept that you're coming from. It's all about nation building, so honestly, there's nothing I really would want to teach them from what I do in my job, outside of the fact that it still helps to keep the system that's in place.
Gotcha. Follow-up question for you, Brother Avery.
Yes, sir.
So in terms of your nation building outside of your job, what could you teach them as far as the organizing piece? If you can make up any lesson, what could you teach them?
That's a good question, brother. What I would say is the level of discipline. So the thing I take away from being employed by the federal government, their structure in place, you have to give them credit. Like, it's soundly fixed. And unless we do something that's comparable to it, you can't just talk about doing away with it. We're all so intertwined in it. So the thing is what I do is I'm constantly refining myself and trying to figure out ways to improve myself, taking what I do on my job and then bringing that back to community building. That's why I'm here trying to figure out how to develop curriculum, because what I do in the government is I'm a part of the Employment Training Administration, and they give out grants for training. However, most of the time when I see the grants go out, the individuals get most of the money tend to be corporations who really don't care about the ones that are supposed to be getting trained. So I don't see the value that we give outside of this. Some business owner that's making big money off of grants funding that they get, which is taxpayer dollars. So the thing is how can I take what I know about the process of the government monitors in the grants that they give out and what they expect paper or documentation wise, and I'll work on an organization or nonprofit outside that's building something for our youth, and want to inject what I know about how the government watches when the money that they may give you, what they're expecting from. So,
That sounds like a lesson plan. That sounds like a whole curriculum to me. Seriously. That sounds like a whole curriculum. You could definitely, man, that's something that you could keep on the hush-hush till you're ready for that, brother. I appreciate you. Let's give him a hand, fam. That's the magic of All Eyes on DC. Bob Keenan, you next?
Yes. So the one main thing that I love about my job is that it ain't no job. It's a career, and it's a business that I'm passionate about. I'm a professional networker, and so I continually build networks. Anything you want to do, I know somebody that do it or has done it, and ain't trying to hurt you. They're gonna help you. Plus, you know, my main network is a network that is a global network that everybody can partake in. It's about wealth building and generational wealth, as well as residual income, something that we all need today, tomorrow, last year. We need it now.
So let's give him a hand, fam. Let's give him a hand. So with networking, what skill sets would you need if you're to be a really high quality networker?
A high quality networker. To be a high quality networker, guess what? You just got to be willing to meet people.
Okay.
You ain't even got to be a big talker. Because you can hand somebody a note that says, "Good morning, go to my website." And the rest is up to them. Okay? And that make you high quality, because you're going to touch thousands, because you ain't going to do it one time.
Right.
You're going to do it 1,000,000 times. Okay? And after a while, you're going to feel comfortable about it. And you're going to start talking to people and sharing with you. And this is the age of sharing. And so you ain't got to talk to people in London. I never spoke to them in London.
Yeah.
I sent them a message. I never spoke to them in South Africa. I sent them a message, and they read the information. And now, guess what? They're all over the globe. It's just that easy.
No, that's right. I'm looking forward to reading the curriculum of yours too. Let's give him a hand, y'all. Let's give him a hand. So that's oftentimes the process. That's how we get up in the morning. We just gotta figure out, all right, why am I up? What do I love about this job, this career path? What am I going to get out of it? You know, and it's easier said than done. This world can weigh down on you quite a lot. But in order for you to become the best teacher possible, you got to look inside yourself, and you got to pretty much just, you know, be whole. Go ahead.
Yeah, but one of the things I really love about my work is that, you know, I'm working for an independent Afrikan-centered institution, and being able to actually have a synthesis between the work that I do outside of work and the work that I do in work. It's no dichotomy between the life that I'm living through work or after work. So that's a beautiful thing, and being able to work with, I work at a school called Nation House, and it's been around for 45 years, just part of the Council of Independent Black Institutions, and one of the earlier schools. I mean, the whole foundation of the school is nation building. I mean, every grade is a different African nation, not like a European nation, but it starts from, you know, you have the Ashanti nation, the Ethiopian nation, Nubian, Zulu, Fulani, Kikuyu, Maasai, these things that we normally call tribes, but really they're their own nations pre-colonial, and so that's what we bring into the students, and they've been doing it quietly, you know, for a very long time with not a lot of hoorah, and I know, like, it's my best job I ever had. Like, I remember, like, being a concierge and working the overnight shift every weekend for like 2 years. Man, it sucked. Like, I hated it. But, like, it's pointless. Like, it's literally a pointless job. So it's like to actually go to a job that actually has, like, all the stuff that we talk about is central. I don't have to have that dichotomy. Now, it comes with its own set of challenges, but everything has its challenges. So it's like, this is the choice that I would make. And I hope, I see how it's already catapulted my life within the 1 year that I've worked there. Yeah, so it's a beautiful experience.
So it sounds like to me, Brother Kamal has found a way to make his craft applicable in the classroom environment. And he has been, you know, he's found the perfect setting in which he can become an instructor and pretty much transfer his knowledge into the classroom where children, young people, can see what he does and they learn the concepts that they can use if they wish to go on the same path. That's revolutionary, y'all. Let's give him a hand, y'all. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide. Time check, please. 9:04, perfect. All right, somebody please stop me at 9:30 for question, Q&A. If I'm not done by 9:30, just please stop me for Q&A. I really want the audience to ask poignant questions, and I really want to continue this discussion. There was a point raised earlier, or rather a point of contention, about setting a career path for the young people. What degree of autonomy do young people have in setting their career path? Or is that a conversation between the elders and the young people? I want us to continue that conversation, and I also want us to touch on other points that audience members might bring up, all right? So, next we're going to go into curriculum development. I got the bricklaying picture right here because, like I told y'all, once we set up that whole paradigm about African-centered education, now it's time to go on from career path to career path to career path to career path, right? Depending on how your school looks, you might have different subject areas, or you might have interdisciplinary education, where children are learning a bunch of disciplines at the very same time. Me, I'm of the mindset that multidisciplinary education or interdisciplinary education is the way to go. I often like mixing English communications and history because through the text, you can teach history. Students, they need to learn the historical context of the speeches, the short stories, the novels that they're reading, because they need to know the mindsets of the authors at that time and the situations and conditions that influence that novel or that piece of work at the time. So it's very fun teaching that. And as you'll see later on, an example of that is the soapstone chart. How many of you guys are familiar with soapstone? Okay, perfect. Soapstone. So soapstone, you have, whenever you're reading a speech, for example, a speech or persuasive essay. Soapstone is an organizational tool, right, that young people can use to pretty much break down a piece of work. It forces them pretty much to map out the piece and analyze it as they go along. So S in Soapstone stands for subject. What is it about? O is the occasion. What is the historical context of this? When did the person write it? Who wrote it? Well, when did they write it pretty much? What was happening around that time? A is for audience. To whom is this person writing or speaking? P is purpose. Purpose is synonymous with main idea. So after you read everything the person wrote, you got to think to yourself, what was the point of everything that they said? S stands for speaker. Who is the person that wrote this? And tone, T-O-N-E. Tone is the speaker's attitude toward the subject, the S at the very top. And you figure out tone by understanding the person's word choice. So my favorite example of tone is when somebody is speaking about your craft. Oh, I see you doing that little show at Sankofa, AllEyesOnDC. What's that person's tone toward me?
Hater.
Exactly. Okay. Let's talk about the word choice. What word choice told you that?
Little.
Okay, come on now. Thank y'all. Let's give them a hand, man. That's how you analyze. And that's what's called critical thinking. Me as a critical thinker, I'm listening to that person and I'm like, I shouldn't invite them to another AllEyesOnDC. I ain't even gonna talk to them.